Well, hello. This video is going to be an update of the progress that I'm making using hydrogen alpha filter that I bought and the O3 filter. These are real inexpensive ones. I picked them up on AliExpress, and I paid, I think, around $50 each for a 72mm size that I wanted to use over the front of a camera lens. So this is what I'm managing to get so far now after a little bit of practice and learning. So this is pretty much the best I've been able to get so far. This is the Pelican Nebula. It's IC5070 in Cygnus, the Swan, right next to the North American Nebula. This particular one, I figured out a way to make an adapter to use my ZWO ASI178mc planetary camera along with my old Nikon 200mm camera lens. I already had one adapter, and then I had to pick up another one to get it to where I could actually connect it to that camera. And then I bought a couple of little these, I call them tube rings. They're little rings for holding telephoto lenses. I'll show you a picture of that stuff too. So here is my little homemade adapter to use my ZWO camera here on the right. This is that ASI178mc planetary camera. And I made I 3D printed a little ring so that I wouldn't have to put that clamp all the way over on the right hand side. I didn't want to cover up those vents, the cooling vents on the camera. And then there's an adapter that goes from C mount to Nikon mount. And then of course I have this other tube ring, kind of, you can see, very homemade setup, so that I could clamp it on the 200mm lens. I'll make a video that shows the little pieces I bought and how I got it all together. So now I'll be able to use this camera with different camera lenses as well. So I noticed when I was playing around looking at fields of view, if I use this same camera with a 300mm, or no, with the 135mm lens that I have, that'll be really nice for the M31 Andromeda Galaxy, and it would work with the Pleiades. So it gives me a variety of fields of view. So I'll make another video to update on that, how I did it, and kind of show you how well it's working. Now, before I got to getting that picture, the night before, I was trying to do a test just to see if I could get focus with both filters, and I was using Nikon D50 on this picture, and the 400mm camera lens, the one that I can focus past infinity. So here I've combined the images. The red is my hydrogen alpha, and then the green and blue is my O3. And doesn't look real exciting, of course, but I'm learning what I wanted to learn. This is M27, the dumbbell, and this was the night before the full moon, so it wasn't really good for much, I didn't think. But I thought, well, I'll see what I can do. And also I wanted to see if Starnet++ would remove the stars, because I had an issue with, I had taken some pictures with the 200mm lens and the D50 and hydrogen alpha of the Veil Nebula, and I was liking what I was seeing, but I couldn't get it to remove all of the stars. And I decided, well, since I only had one color, everything was in red, that maybe it just didn't see them as stars. I really wasn't sure. So I thought, well, I'll do this, and it did remove them. I'll show you what happened then. So it did take out the stars nice and successful, and I didn't take any flat frames or anything. I've got some spots of dirt or something on there. I'll do a real quick level here on it. Kind of probably overdoing it a little, just doing it real quick. But I could see here with just a few minutes of data with real high gain and, like I say, no flat frames or anything, you can really see the vignetting. I was getting both oxygen 3 and hydrogen alpha, so this is actually a good target for me to try another time. But anyway, after that, the next night, I had got my adapters going so I could use the ZWO camera and the 200mm lens, and figured, since it's so much of a newer camera, I could get less noise. Plus, it also has a live view, which is nice when you're trying to get focus, since I had to refocus with each filter. So this is what my hydrogen alpha looked like after just a little bit of stretching, enough to kind of try to bring up all the stars to put it into Starnet++. And then I'll show you the oxygen 3 one. So here's oxygen 3, and you probably notice you don't see near as much detail in it. And I wasn't sure if I could get Starnet++ to remove the stars without actually combining the two. So I did do that, and I also tried it with each one separately, and it actually worked. So maybe it's because my stars I have a lot more stars that are completely saturated and kind of overexposed. I'm not real sure. So here's where I just combined the two different images, the hydrogen alpha in red and the oxygen 3 in green and blue. So while I'm thinking about it, I guess I should show you how I went about combining my hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3 to get them into one image. It's not too difficult. So I opened up each one. So here I've got the hydrogen alpha opened up, and then we'll go over here to the oxygen 3 I have opened up, and I do a select all and then copy, and then I go back over here to hydrogen alpha, edit, paste as a new layer. Now when it's normal, of course it's opaque. Now when I was doing my ones before where I'd do the stars only, you might remember I would play with the opacity, which you could do, but then I'd lose. If I actually had some good detail in the oxygen 3, it would be harder to see. So the real normal way to do it is to go down and find these. You've got screen and you've got addition, and I ended up settling with screen. As you can see, they're not lined up. That's where I had to line them up. But you can also do addition, and I didn't really notice any difference between the two, but I got on Google and looked it up. And apparently if you do addition, depending on your image, it might make the really light areas extra bright. So I guess I would be prepared to try either one. Try both of them and see which one you like. And as you can see, once they're in here, now I've got, because before when I was just, I didn't have data in all of my channels here. Like when I had just the hydrogen alpha open, only had data in red, and when I had the oxygen 3 only opened, I only had data in the green and blue. So I combined these, used my move tool here, and did a little move. And you might notice here too, see I needed to rotate it. They don't really line up. So that's when I looked around and found this rotate tool here. And what I would do, I had in this case, the top layer selected, the oxygen 3, and I'd just click it a few times, and I really couldn't see what was going on here, so I'd hit readjust, and it'd take a little bit to process. It may have processed it already. I think it would show the progress down here, but I had to do it a few times, and each time I'd do it, I waited for it to... Oh, wait, I accidentally clicked readjust. Okay, so let's say you go give a few, then you click rotate. Now it says rotating, and that takes depending on how big your file is, it might take quite a while. But anyway, I went through that, and I'll pause while that's finishing. Okay, so that did its thing. And then after that, I just right-clicked this top one and did my merge down, made it all into one layer, and then I exported it as a TIFF with a new name. And at one point I had trouble getting it to open up in other software, so I played around, and I didn't think I should have to do it, but I went to image and flatten image, and then told it to export to the same file, basically resaved it, and then it worked. And I think it also brought up a message when I opened it in GIMP that just said something like import from TIFF or something like that, and I just clicked OK, and then it opened up. And let's see, also I had done, when I did get my good picture, I had also taken kind of a stars only set of exposures. So I did those there with no filter. And this particular time I kept the gain at 200 and did 10-second exposures. And they weren't too bad. And I think I did like 60 some of them. So I mean, I kind of did it real quick. It wouldn't hurt to do more and maybe use less gain and all that. But like I say, a lot of this was experimental, and I just wanted to see what I could get. But it definitely, I like the idea of exposing my stars separately if I want to try to get color. And plus, if you're, if you happen to be having a little bit of a guiding issue, having shorter exposures might help you get rounder stars. So here's what I had after it removed the stars, and of course this is before I do any extra processing, but I'll show you when I take out the oxygen 3. This looks like I got something to work with. Now what about here? If I'm looking at just the oxygen 3, it seems like there's almost nothing there. And I started doing some stretching, and I'll show you some of that here. I'll just do a quick stretch to kind of give you an idea. This is where I ended up finding kind of a happy accident, if you will. I noticed that seemed like there was almost nothing in the oxygen 3 helping me out. And so here I've brought it up some. So you can see I'm starting to get some detail showing up here, the nebula in hydrogen alpha, but There actually is a little bit here in this, but it seems like it's mostly just this amp glow stuff. And I noticed, it's dark over here, and of course the amp glow's coming in from the upper right. I'll show you what the fit file looked like to give you an idea. So here's just a raw exposed fit file, and this is actually from the Oxygen 3. It's funny how it looks red down here when they stretch it, and the other one looks kind of bluish, but this is the correct one. But you can see the amp glow coming out up here in the upper right, and it starts spiking out. I'll try to get my cursor out of the way. It keeps bringing up that stuff. But that's what's giving me issues, and when I stretch it, that stuff comes way out. But anyway, when I noticed that it seemed like the Oxygen 3 wasn't really helping me, I started wondering, is it possible to turn this into an amp glow removal layer? And because I should have some dark areas over here too in between the nebula. I'll show you on my final picture here in a minute. So you can see here I've managed to get some black to show up in here, and there's still a little bit right at the end of this brightness up here from the amp glow, and I think I can work with that and kind of reduce that a little too. So this pasted layer here this is my amp glow layer that I kind of invented. And I'll show you what I did with it to kind of create it. So here's my starless version of the 03 after Starnet++ removed the stars. And this was without any extra stretching. But what I ended up doing, and I think actually when I made that mask, I did have it stretched. This is what I came up with. Let me get this in position. This is my final one, and I made it out of that Oxygen 3, and I'll show you what I did. So what I did was I had to swap the colors. I needed to move this out of the green and blue and up into the red. So I go to Colors and down to Components, and then Channel Mixer, and I made it so that, let's see, I put the red in red at 0. There wasn't anything there anyway, and I'm getting it kind of approximate here. I'm supposed to drag it down to 0, and then I wanted 100% of the green to show up as red, and the same with the blue. So imagine those being at 1.00, they're actually a little off. And then I took the green in green down to 0, and the same with the blue and blue. And I don't have them exactly on 0s and 1, but it gives you an idea. What I did was swap them out, and now after I click it, everything that was in green and everything that was in blue moved up into red. And after I had done some stretching, it ended up showing this. So what I wanted to do was subtract this, and I'll show you over here on my other one. This one here is the one where I got it finished. So this here is what my pasted layer, this is that amp glow remover layer. And what I did was, originally it was really bright like this. So all I did was go into colors and brightness, contrast, and I kept dragging the brightness down until I got it to where if I can find the right one again, sorry here. There we go. I wanted to do was get it to where the brightness up here in the brightest area looked similar between the two, which right now it looks like it's a little brighter. So I was playing with it, and then of course I took this layer here and made it subtract. It was normal before, so see if it's normal, it just shows up opaque. So I went down and found subtract, and that worked pretty well. Like I said, it's not perfect, but I knew there was supposed to be some areas here. So I'm getting ideas from this that it might be possible for me to make amp glow removal layers whenever I do something. I may be able to do it with, any kind of camera that has a lot of amp glow. So of course one idea, that image was it was treated like a regular image. I took dark frames, I took flats, did the whole thing, and I was trying to stretch it and process it like a normal image, which brought the amp glow up more. If I didn't stretch it as much, the amp glow wouldn't show so bad, but I was really trying to crank it up. So one thought I've thought about is to point it at an area of the sky where there's no real nebula. So in other words, I'd be kind of pointing out in the area towards where the distant galaxies are and point at a spot where I'm not going to pick anything up. So, I wouldn't point it at M31 or something. I'd try to point it at a area that was supposedly kind of dead, and maybe, with no bright stars, and then treat it like I'm taking an image, then run it through Starnet++ and process it and see if I can make kind of a master amp glow removal layer. Now when I did this, my exposure times were actually different for the oxygen 3 and the hydrogen alpha. I'm sure it would be best if they were the same. They were the same gain though. I took this picture, the initial, and this was over actually the one I'm looking at now is over 3 nights. But the originally, when I started doing it, was the night of the full moon, and it was one, here I guess it was like September 17th or something, when we had the partial eclipse of the moon, where it blocked like 8% of the moon here in Indiana. The moon was real high, so the sky was pretty washed out. So I was going with high gain, and I did 2-minute exposures on oxygen 3, and I did 4-minute exposures on hydrogen alpha. So here I was, this is a screenshot of my ZWO capture software, and this is of course with the 03, and if you notice the histogram, I got my faintest detail to go to the right of 0 a little ways, and then that's at 2 minutes, and then the one for hydrogen alpha at 4 minutes didn't go quite as far over. I'll show you a picture of it. So here's hydrogen alpha, and as you can see, the histogram doesn't go over as much, and this is at 4 minutes, both at the same gain. So that hydrogen alpha seems like it blocks a lot more light. So I learned something new from that, seeing the histogram come over, because that's another thing, when I'm shooting them with my Nikon D50, I don't see a histogram while I'm doing it. Some DSLRs do, but not that. I'll end up seeing a histogram when I'm messing with the files later, like in raw therapy. When I'm viewing the raw files, it'll show a histogram, and then I also get one, I can get one in GIMP. Another way to do that would be kind of like the same way you shoot a flat frame. If I can figure out how to do that, if I was shooting an evenly illuminated area, I wouldn't be trying to remove any stars. Of course, there's a big difference between lighting up an area, like, with a monitor or something, and just shooting at a dark area of sky. I think the full moon also helped kind of illuminate the sky evenly. That was one thing I thought about. I wasn't really getting a line between the dark sky and the light pollution from the town. So here's the area I was imaging. I was getting, there's your Pelican Nebula, and I was getting these, there's this little gap with the two bright stars, and then down at the bottom of my frame was this bright star, and I was coming across. So I was getting a little bit of the edge of the North American Nebula, and I think a little bit of nebulosity up here, but I knew I should have black most of the way around it. Whenever I see nice pictures of it, it doesn't have all that glow. So anyway, I feel like I'm making some good progress. This image that I'm working with here at the end is that's from 3 nights. I had 53 4-minute exposures, which gave me about, I think it was 3 hours and 32 minutes or something. So let's see, so here you can see you got your Pelican, and then you got the little 2 bright stars between, and over here this is where the North American Nebula is, so I should be expecting to see some nebulosity here. And I may have a little excess junk from noise of the camera and overlapping frames and what have you. I don't think this here should be quite this glowy. Another thing I just remembered, if you notice, after I swapped these, you don't really see the detail of the nebula too much in here. What I did, I played around with some filters, and I went to blur, and the one that seemed to help me was this lens blur, and I just cranked this radius all the way over to the right, and it changed it from what I had. Matter of fact, I'll call that one up just to kind of show you what it does. So I'll just kind of try to bring a little of the detail up first. Imagine that I'm still trying to find some nebulosity in here. I'm cranking up the curve a little, getting rid of some of the stuff there. Actually, if I try hard enough, I can get some. But you see it's mostly junk. And what I did when I brought up this lens blur, if I drag this radius all the way to the right, and it takes a few seconds, I think, here for it to process it. It will start to diffuse that. And I may have stretched this more than the one that I ended up settling with. So this is kind of experimental. Yeah, this one here, I think too, I stretched it a little more. I see it's a little over processed looking. I thought see, this other one here looks a little smoother. But anyway, that's just I wanted to give you an idea of what I'm playing with. And I feel like with some experimentation, I can do something with this amp glow removal. It's not perfect, but if you got a noisy camera that's got a lot of amp glow, and see, I mean, the dark frames don't take it out. I took plenty of dark frames. I even did an experiment a while back with the Nikon D50. One night I sat here in the house and took like 4 hours worth of dark frames just to see what it would do, and it didn't make any difference. When I started stretching it, the amp glow comes up, the noise is there. But I'm gonna keep playing with it, and I think I've found a way to at least remove a fair amount of it out of the final picture.